with our speaker tonight. And may you enlighten her heart and her mind to bring us enlightenment. This way, we express our gratitude for this moment and many more to come that we will be together, learning more and working together more to create a better present and future for all of us. We thank you, and so be it. I'd like to ask a question. What is the ultimate indication of getting old? Aches and pains? White hair? No. No, it is when we have a speaker in the house who we saw very, very young, right, Bia? In different events of life and good ones, which were Spiritists. And the speaker was a little tiny one running around, like we see Raphael, right? And the other ones, right? And tonight, or this afternoon into this evening, I'm really excited to see somebody who we saw that way, right? We grew with her. And here she is tonight to bring us and talk about education from the book Thought and Life. Before, all jokes aside, I'm very happy to have you here. This is a compliment. Take it as a compliment, please, and for all of us as well to learn with one another, right? Because Spiritism brings us this enlightenment in terms of there is space for everyone as we take the charge of our destiny, of our energies, right, to do good, especially with Spiritism. But with this in mind, Beatriz Lopes is currently the Family, Youth, and Children's Spiritist Education FYCSE Director for the United States Spiritist Federation. She is a representative of the U.S. within the International Spiritist Council Youth Committee. Being a Spiritist since childhood, Bia had the remarkable opportunity to represent Spiritism globally at the United Nations at the age of 16. Since Bia has actively taken his various roles within the Spiritist community, from leading study groups to delivering lectures and organizing events like the annual Spiritist Retreat. And as I was saying, many, many events that we have seen online, that we have seen personally as well, that she has endured the sacrifice, the hard work to bring Spiritism. And tonight, as I said, talking about education. Who doesn't need education, right? We need education to educate, right? But she'll talk more about that. I'm not going to take much more of her time. Thank you, Bia, for being here. And the floor is yours. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here today with me. I'm just going to take my watch. Oh, there's a time up there. Okay. Just to keep me on track. I'm going to mess with this, so 1 second. Okay, there you go. So education is a topic that we talk a lot about. But what I found really interesting in the book Thought and Life by Emmanuel through the medium Chico Xavier, what I thought really interesting about this message is the perspective that he brings to this topic of education. He really takes it in a different direction, in a way that we don't really think about it before. So what seems like a simple topic actually has a lot of deep reflections for me and hopefully for you all as well. So before we get into that, let's start by talking about the Apostle Matthew. So during the time of Jesus, Matthew was a tax collector. Second. 1 second. There we are. I think there's, let me see. All right, there we go. So Matthew was a tax collector, and the gospel, according to Spiritism, the introduction of it actually gives us some definitions of what this meant at the time. So tax collectors were those were the lower class tax collectors who were mainly in charge of collecting dues at the city gates. So they kind of stayed at the city gate and collected money in and out. There was also the publicans, and the publicans were the higher level tax collectors. And the tax collectors, and specifically the publicans, had a bad reputation because they often took advantage of people. Think about back then, what records did people have to know how much money they owed? So when these tax collectors showed up, they could kind of say whatever number they wanted, and they were often keeping some in their pocket for themselves. So there develops the common phrase, greedy as a publican or rich as a publican. And it's this idea that the tax collectors were not very liked in the society. People tried to ignore them, tried to steer clear. They didn't want to befriend the tax collectors because they had this negative connotation to them. So Matthew was doing this job as a tax collector at the city gates, the lower level, and that's what he was doing. And while some of Jesus's disciples have more elaborate stories of how they started following Jesus, Matthew's is really quite simple. In the gospel, according to Matthew, it says, as Jesus went on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax collector's booth. Follow me, he told him. And Matthew got up and followed him. So from that moment, Jesus walking by Matthew in his tax collector booth, seeing Matthew there, and with this simple idea of follow me. And Matthew said, yeah, that's exactly what I'm going to do. And as you can see that this is the gospel from Matthew, Matthew also became an evangelist, meaning that he is the author of one of the four gospels, the Gospel of Matthew. And this makes a lot of sense because he was the tax collector. He was keeping a lot of records. He was used to that. So as he was following Jesus throughout Jesus's journey, he was taking good notes of everything that was happening. And so after leaving his job as a tax collector, Matthew starts to follow Jesus and becoming a disciple, one of the followers of Jesus. So he starts following Jesus everywhere, and he starts documenting everything that Jesus is doing. And in Matthew 4, verse 23-25, Matthew talks about how as Jesus is traveling from cities to cities, more and more people start following Jesus. They're following because they want to see what he's going to do. They want to see a miracle, or they just are curious. They want to learn more. So as he's traveling from city to city, there's these crowds of people that start just joining in just to follow, just to walk. They're not even sure where they're going. And from that, there's a moment when Jesus is traveling and he notices that all of these people, these crowds, are now following him. And he's seeing these crowds. Jesus went onto the top of a mountain, but it was more likely, right, a hill, a mount. Jesus went up to this higher point and called everyone, called his disciples, called all the people that were following him, that were curious to learn more, and said, everyone come, let's take a moment. And he gave a lot of lessons in this moment. And this became the famous Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus brings lots of inspiring messages to the people that were there. And there's Matthew, right, recording all of this. Some of the famous messages that Jesus shares in this time are the Beatitudes. These are the messages such as, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. And blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Just to name a few. So those are some of the famous messages that we always quote that happened right here in this Sermon of the Mount. And another message that happened that I think is a little less talked about is the message of the salt and the light. So in that, Jesus says, "You are the salt of the earth." So when we think about this, right, that's kind of vague. What does that mean? But when we think about salt, all throughout history, salt has had a really important meaning in our lives. Salt, before we had refrigerators, was used to preserve meat, to preserve things. In the Roman Empire, salt was so important that they used it as a form of currency. It was so valuable that was something that was valuable to trade. Salt has also been used therapeutically in medicines over time, and so much more on top of just the everyday use of salt that we use to season our food. So when Jesus is saying, "You are the salt of the earth," he's really saying that we're important. We have the ability to be used for so much good. The same way that salt is used for so much and is so useful. We have that ability to be so useful, to help others, to spread goodness, to charity, love, share Jesus' teachings. But, Jesus continues, "But if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything, except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet." So, salt is so important because of those good qualities that it has, because of all those reasons that it's helping. But if salt wasn't salty, it wouldn't do all of those things that we were talking about. If it didn't have its main attributes, it would just be another rock, another stone that we walk over. And so that is the message Jesus is bringing here, is that we're the salt of the earth. We can be used for so many reasons, for so many purposes, be so useful. But if we're not doing anything with that, if we disregard, if we leave that to the side, if we are not taking advantage of everything we can do, then that goes away. That's not as useful. So it's important for us to remember that, right? Salt is meant to be salty, and it becomes worthless if it uses our quality. So we're meant to be used for the good. We're meant to do good things to help others. And that is what makes it worthwhile, right? For us to be here, for us to learn, help one another, and to the topic, educate. And then Jesus continues and says, "You are the light of the world." So first Jesus describes as the salt of the earth, and then he says the light of the world. When we think of light, what do we think of? When we think of light, especially now as the springtime is approaching and we feel that sun again on our face, we remember that importance of the light, of the sun, right? We feel good to be in the light again. So light is so important in our lives. So just like the salt is, light is also important. And what Jesus is saying here is, you are the light. You are that light. You can shine your light for others as well. And Jesus says, "A city set on a hill cannot be hidden." So I brought a real example here of the city of San Marino. The city of San Marino is located in the country of San Marino, which is actually one of the smallest countries in the world that's completely enclosed in Italy. So it's a small country within Italy, and the city, the capital city of San Marino, is on this mountain. So this is a great example that a city that's on the top of a hill, on top of the mountain, it can't be hidden. Everyone below, everyone can see that city. Nor, the same way that, right, we're not going to hide a city that's on a hill, nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and gives it light, and it gives light to all the house. So when you're lighting a candle or a flashlight or holding up some kind of light, you don't hold it down, you don't hide it, right? People walk like this with lights, right, with flashlights, so that light spreads as far as possible. So we're not going to hide that city on the hill, and we're not going to hide that light that we have. So in the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good work and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. So that same way that that city is shining, that this light, we're not going to hide it, we need to do that with the light that's inside each and every one of us. And so, getting to the message from the Spirit Emmanuel in the book Thought in Life, this is exactly how he starts off the message. He says, Christ said, "Let your light shine." And that's this opening of this message that Emmanuel is going to dig into. What does this mean, letting your light shine? And it is he, the divine master, who is our sublime light in the evolution of this planet. So what Emmanuel is saying here is that Jesus Christ is telling us, let your light shine. And Jesus is that light. He has that light. So it's way more valuable when someone who has something is telling you that you can do the same, right? If someone didn't have the light and they're telling you, it's like, oh, okay, maybe they're just encouraging me, but what do they know? But no, in this case, right, Jesus really does know. He has that light. He knows what that light is. And he's saying that we all have that within us and we can all let that shine. But at the time, as Emmanuel is going to continue to tell us, people used to believe that the Lord's advice was a mystical call, urging superficial worshippers within Orthodoxy to believe in a supposed individual prominence to be acquired after death upon entering an imaginary celestial court. So what Emmanuel is saying here is that, okay, people saw this message, let your light shine, and they thought, okay, maybe that's just for the future. Maybe that's after I die, I want to let my light shine so that I can get into heaven. So they saw it really superficial. They didn't see it as any action that they have to take right now. So, and this came, a lot of people were really thinking of that light as meaning heaven, as meaning angels, right? You think of this lightness. So that's what they were thinking about. They're like, I'll let my light shine after I die, when I get to heaven, whatever's next. And it's interesting because it seems a little silly for us to think that now, but actually in the book Heaven and Hell, it gives us a little more explanation of why people had this idea, why they had this concept. And so the book Heaven and Hell tells us that the ancients believed that there existed different levels of heaven that surrounded the earth. So the earth was at the center, and then there were different levels of heaven. And the idea was that they thought let your light shine meant that once you die, let your light shine to hopefully get you to the top level, right? That'll make it which level you're going to end up on. And what's interesting about this is that they had this idea, but all theogonies, all different systems of gods at that time that they all had this concept in some way. They all had this idea of multiple layers of heaven, of a higher sky. And so that's really where they're thinking about let your light shine means, okay, let me get to the top of this. And most commonly, here you're seeing 3 levels. Most commonly in these ancient religions, they would refer to 7 levels of the sky. But Ptolemy actually identified 11. And so Ptolemy was an Egyptian astronomer, mathematician, geographer, and he was really well known at the time for a lot of his findings. And most importantly, his theory, his creation of the geocentric model of the universe, which is the model of the universe that the Earth is at the center and the sun and the planets and everything is going around the Earth. While today we know that that's incorrect, this was a big step forward in the right direction at the time. So while we now know that this is not, that it's not Earth-centered, this was a really important thought, a really important model that he created. But what's interesting in this model is that in the first few levels, we actually see our planets. We see Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. We see the planets. But then in the outer rings of that, we see the different levels of heaven. The last one being Empyrean heaven, because it's the one that shines the brightest, the most blessed, that top heaven. So again, this just brings us some context that when people thought, let your light shine, they were really thinking like, okay, how do I get from earth to that top level? And they thought this all happened after death, right? After death, oh, I've done good enough, and then my light will shine. But weren't really thinking about the work we have to do right now to let our light shine. And Emmanuel points this out today to us, and he says, however, today we should recognize that his lesson should be applied in every situation of everyday life. So let your light shine does not mean to wait for after you die, for whatever comes after. It means right now. It means what are we doing right now to do our best, to do good, to follow Jesus' teachings. In the smallest situation, the biggest situation, everything in between in our lives, we can be working on letting our light shine, and there's no reason to wait. Nowadays, Emmanuel continues, nowadays, earthly science recognizes the presence of light in all places. So what's really interesting is that we know in science that there's the visible spectrum of light and there's the invisible spectrum of light, which is a lot more. So all of these things you see here are light, but we only see a really small part of it based on the wavelength. And if your wavelength was slightly different, you would see things completely different, such as dogs that we know see things a little bit differently because their eyes pick up a little bit different of a wavelength. But all of these things are light. All of these things are around us all the time, are waves just like we're seeing here. You know, we see the radios that are gathering in larger waves, or the X-rays and the radioactivity that's in smaller waves, but all of these are different forms of light. And while we can only see that small part, and you see that even the sun is not included in our visible light because we can't actually look at the sun ourselves, right, with our eyes. But even now and today, we see that more and more technology is developing to see these different types of light. There's cameras now that can pick up different wavelengths that our eye doesn't see. And now there's even optics, which is a branch of physics that specifically studies the behaviors and properties of light. So Emmanuel's point here is, right, light is everywhere, all around us, not just the light that we usually think of. And now Emmanuel goes a little scientific for us. So we're gonna break this up. A deeper study of the human body has revealed that it is more a vehicle of energy than it is a state of matter. A compound of infinitesimal particles reciprocally attracting and repelling each other, causing micro explosions of light. So that is a big scientific paragraph there, but let's dig into it a little bit. So, as we know in science, everything is made up of molecules, and the molecules are made up of atoms, like we're seeing here. So, common one, right? We think of H2O, one molecule made of 3 atoms. And when we see here this one atom, we see that the electrons are going around in a circle and they're constantly moving. And inside there's the neutrons and the protons, and they're working together in the nucleus. But as you can kind of see in this image, they're also moving. So these are constantly moving together in this like ball form, and the electrons are moving around it. Science has actually now even discovered that the protons and the neutrons can be broken down even further into a smaller particle called quarks. And so all of these pieces, so microscopic, are moving. And when we see this, we think, wow, like that atom is a lot of empty space, right? So there's a small center and there's the electrons moving around, but there's a lot of empty space around it. But when science digs into this further, this actually isn't empty space. This is energy in different forms. So the first is the moving energy, right? The electrons moving, the particles in the neutron and the nucleus moving. And so these are all moving, and this is the kinetic energy. While science has also said that there is what they call the strong force. The strong force is what holds all of that atom together. It's what holds those things together in the nucleon and what holds the electron in those circles so that it's not just flying everywhere. And that is our potential energy. So really everything that we're seeing here as empty space is really energy. And if we take a little zoom out, then we see all these atoms and these different particles moving together, and we again see that that is a lot of empty space. But this constant movement, this constant attraction and repelling and hitting each other is causing, like it's saying in the paragraph above, microscopic explosions of light. So this is light, this is energy. And to help explain this a little bit, we can turn to the famous equation from Albert Einstein, E equals mc squared. And when we really break down this formula, what Einstein is telling us is that energy, the E, is related to mass. And given the right circumstances, these can be interchangeable. So that energy, right? We think of an atom. We can imagine how it weighs close to nothing. But what the weight is coming from, the mass is coming from, is actually the energy with that speed of light. So Einstein here is, with this equation that we often say but don't think about, is showing us how energy and mass have this relationship. So all of the things that we're seeing as this is empty space or this is energy, this is making up the mass that we are. And so, right, if we could somehow take a photo of our bodies, of everything that we're made up of, we would see that all of these atoms, all these microscopic particles that we can't see, there is a lot of empty space there. And that empty space is energy. So when we go back to what Emmanuel says, exactly what he was saying, a deeper study of the human body reveals that it's more a vehicle of energy than it is a state of matter. So it's more energy. There's more energy and movement than we could even imagine is going on. And that's what's creating the mass that we think of. So it's not like sand in a sandbag that every inch of empty space is taken up. No, they're moving, there's space, but that space is energy. So the human body, everything, it's this energy, this light that's all around us. And Emmanuel continues on this scientific thought, and he says, chemistry, physics, and astronomy have demonstrated that terrestrial man lives and moves amidst a realm that is crisscrossed by rays. So we look at this simple photo, but really, right, there's the light, there's the sun, there's the fireplace, but there's also infrared light that's coming off of the animal. You know, of course, there's a dentist across the street in this that has the x-ray lights, and the phone and the laptop is giving off lights. So there's all of these lights that are constantly around us that we don't realize. So really, right, if we could see all of those wavelengths, we would be seeing more like this. We would be seeing these lights, these different things crossing all around us. As Emmanuel is saying, a realm that crisscrossed by rays. So what does this have to do with us, really? So Emmanuel takes us a step further, and he says, in the intimacy of this glorious empire of energy, we have mental rays conditioning the elements in which life expresses ourselves. So now Emmanuel is going to connect how these rays that we see, this energy, this light, the way it moves, is also how our thoughts are working. Thought is a creative force projected by the person who generates it by means of subtle waves in circuits of action and reaction. So just like we observed with light, Emmanuel stating here that our thoughts, they're projecting in that same manner. They are also waves that are moving, that are constantly all around us. And so once again, we'll take a second to turn to Einstein, and this time with his quantum theory of light. So in 1905, the fact that light moved in waves was a pretty common concept. Everyone agreed with it. It was established. It was refutable. Everyone agreed that light moved in these wave patterns that we saw before. But what Einstein takes a step further in his quantum theory of light is that not only does light move in a waves, but it actually travels in a bundle of energy. This that he called the photon. So he is saying that really the light is coming in one bundle of energy, and that is moving along the wave. And so this was the first time that someone had explained, when Einstein brought this was the first time someone had explained that light moves not only as a wave, but also as a particle. And this is important because Emmanuel actually talks about the photon. So again, back to what we had before. Thought is a creative force projected by the person who generates it by means of subtle waves in action and reaction. So those waves, right? The action and reaction is the waves. And it says, this is as measurable as the photon that we just saw, which, on receiving impulses through the luminous system it produces, travels through space at a predetermined speed, thus sustaining the glowing breath of creation. So Emmanuel's saying that the same way that the light is moving with waves and through a photon, it's similar to how our thoughts behave. When we're thinking things, right, that's leaving me, it's going to you, and yours is coming back to me. So there's this, the same way that we can measure light, our thoughts and our sentiments are also as measurable. And just for reference, right, because it says not at the same speed, but at a predetermined speed. When we think about the speed of light, we don't actually associate a number with it, but there is an actual number associated with the speed of light. And what this means is that you can get from the Earth to the moon in about 1.3 seconds. So that is very fast. So not saying that it's the same speed, but at a similar predetermined speed, our thoughts are moving like that. We're in this constant exchange of thoughts and interactions as well. Again, we say, the human mind is a mirror of light, which projects and assimilates rays. So our mind, right, we have the ability, when we shine our light, we have the ability to shine these rays out. And it's important to remember that we're also perceptible to what other people are shining onto us, right? And also, we talk about shining light, but this is the good and bad thoughts. When someone is having good, positive thoughts, we can tell that we pick up on that. We feel good about that. But when we feel someone having a negative energy, that also impacts us. So it's the same way we're talking about light in this constant exchange, so is our thoughts. However, this mirror is more or less a prisoner of the thick shadows of ignorance. Just as before excavating a precious stone is encrusted by subterranean sediments. So that light that we saw before, shining, this mirror that's shining and reflecting, taking in light and shining it back out, really what happens to us is that there's a barrier, there's a basket over, there's something blocking it. And, knowing all of us are imperfect, and we all have those things that are holding us back, that are stopping our light from shining. So, and what Emmanuel is highlighting here as our shadows of ignorance, the things that we don't know, that are holding us back, that are confining our light, and they're also not allowing light to come into us. So our mirror is there, but if it's blocked, then we can't get into it and we can't emit from it. And so the same way that, as it's mentioning in the example, that a diamond, if the diamond is stuck in this rock, if it was fully closed, it wouldn't be able to shine to be that diamond that we all know, that we all think about. It has to get a lot of work to get out to really be able to shine. And so Emmanuel, on this thought, says, in order to be able to give off these celestial rays, and to project its own brightness, it is indispensable to cast off this layer of darkness through a process at the cost of grinding work. So to get that diamond out of that stone, we have to do a lot of work. We have to put a lot of manual labor into it. We have to get the tools. We really have to work. And that's the same thing for our light that's inside of us. If we are blocking it with ignorance, if it's blocked with this basket, we need to put in the work to uncover that. And it's not going to be easy, the same way it's not easy to get the diamond out of the rock. It's going to take a lot of work, but we need to do that same thing with us internally. And it's also important to note that even through all of that work of getting the stone outside of the bigger rock, the diamond is still not shining like we know it, like we expect it to, right? There's still more work to be done to refine it, to get it into that diamond. So this is a lot of work that goes into it. And the same thing needs to be done for us to get rid of that ignorance, of those shadows that are not allowing our light to shine. And then Emmanuel says, hence the real need for education for everyone. So this is why we need education, because we need to help ourselves and others get rid of these shadows of ignorance that are holding us back, not allowing us to admit our light and not allowing light to come in. And of course, as Kardec reminds us in the Spirit's book, question 685, education is the sum of acquired habits. So it's not going to happen easily, the same way that that diamond is not going to be refined easily. It's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of time, but we have to put in that work. We have to put in that dedication, right? If everyone took a moment to think of a habit that they wish they had, think about how many times we try it and then it doesn't work. And then we try it again and it doesn't work, right? We can try it for a day, a week, a month, and still it's not fully clicking, right? Because education, when you fully get that skill, that is when it becomes that acquired habit. But we can't just try it for a day. We can't just put in a little effort. We really have to do a lot to be able to get to the point that's like, I feel like I really know this. I really understand this. And so then Emmanuel continues. Let us also remember the words we referred to before of the eternal benefactor in his verbal lesson, which he said in an imperative form, let your light shine. Meaning that the potential of light in our spirit should shine to its fullest. What's so important about how Jesus said this was not find your light, was not try and get light, was not, oh, save your light for later. It's saying we have light already. Jesus knows that we all have light inside of us. We just have to let it shine. That's up to us. We can let it shine at any moment, not in the future, not tomorrow, not next year, now. We can start letting our light shine. Such a state can only be reached through the kind of education that will offer the required improvements. And so now in these last two paragraphs, Emmanuel really brings us what this means, what this true education is that we can help refining ourselves to shine our light. But education that refines the intellect and improves mankind's inner world in knowledge and goodness, wisdom and virtue, is not achieved merely by instruction from the outside. So, yes, school is important. Outside education is important. We need that education coming in, but that's not the only piece. What it needs is the conscious consent of the will. When we dedicate ourselves freely, spontaneously to goodness, without any constraints, it can liberate and refine the heart, imprinting on it a crystal clear image of the soul. The soul is then able to reflect glorious life, subsequently transforming the mind into a precious powerhouse of superior energy, projecting reflexes of beauty and sublimation. So it's not just about getting education from other people, from other places. It's about allowing that education to impact us. It's about having that conscious consent, that we're allowing those teachings to come to us. When we dedicate ourselves to this, then that's when our light will shine, when we allow ourselves to learn. How many times are there people who you want to help or want to help you, but they can't change anything, or we can't change anything unless that person wants to. Unless they want to make the change, then they will. But if they don't want to, we're not going to be able to. So it's important to educate, but it's also important for us to be open to that education, to have that willingness to learn, to improve, to take those barriers that are holding our light from shining. And to put this into perspective a little bit, I brought a message from the book Volte, which means returned, by Chico Xavier, by the spirit known as Brother Jacob. And so Brother Jacob, he discarnated from the earth not too long ago. And he was a good man. He was really involved in Spiritism. He was really good. He was involved in helping other people. So everyone thought that, okay, he's a pretty decently evolved spirit. Everyone's in agreement with that. And so when he does disincarnate and he gets to the spirit world, he does indeed end up at a pretty good spiritual world. He sees that, okay, I am a little good. It's like, okay, everyone's like in agreement. But he's looking around and he realizes that the other spirits there have this light to them. And he said, where's my light? And he realizes that even though he thought he was doing good, he was helping others, he was really involved, he was not yet letting his light shine. And this really shocked him. And so he took time there, really working on improving himself, on learning, on working to better himself and help other people. But all the meantime, he was wondering, okay, when do I get my light like everyone else? And so he's studying almost a year, and he's studying and trying to get better, trying to learn, improve himself. And one night, going back to his home, he's attacked by a furious group of clergy, of people from the Catholic Church. And in that moment, he remembers that on his earthly incarnation, he used to belittle people of the church. He used to talk badly about them. He said, oh, what are those people doing? And he used to put them down. And so now here they were attacking him. But having been studying and having been working on himself, he wasn't intimidated, he wasn't mad or violent. And instead, he started to meditate. He started to pray. He prayed for those troubled spirits. He sympathized for what they were going through. He apologized for what he had done because he knew that he was in the wrong as well. And he really prayed for real. Not a fake prayer, not just thinking about something else. He really prayed for real. And he was so passionate, so moved, that he even started to cry. So he's there in the midst of all of this, praying and crying. And when he opens his eyes, he sees that they're backing away. And he sees this light next to him. And he says, okay, like my prayer worked. A spirit came to help me in this moment. And the enlightened spirit came to him and said, Jacob, do not be amazed by the light that surrounds you. It belongs to you. And in that moment, he was speechless. He had found his light. And this light didn't come out of nowhere. It didn't just come because he was surface level accomplished or he helped people here and there. It came from his intentional and dedicated study to improving himself, to being a better person. It was taking that time to take off the basket, the rock that was covering his light. And then the enlightened spirit says to him, Your light will grow with the expansion of your devotion to the infinite good. So the more that we are devoting ourselves to the good, to helping other people, to being the best version of ourselves, not just externally, but internally, the more our light is going to grow, the more our light is going to expand. We can't just expect to shine. We need to put in that work ourselves. But when we do, there will be no stopping the reach of our light. And so to end off today, I just want to end with a message from André Luiz from Chico Xavier that just gives us a little bit of guidance on how we can start doing this in our daily lives. In your daily struggles, do not demand politeness from your companions. Demonstrate yours. Referring to good deeds, do not await for collaboration. Before all else, be the first to collaborate. In trivial tasks, do not demand the effort of others. Show your own goodwill. In jobs that require understanding, do not ask your neighbor to rise to your level. Learn to descend his and help him. In the ordinary dealings of life, do not wait for others to reveal their excellent qualities. Express the elevated gifts that you already possess. And in every earthly creature, there exists light and shadow. Allow your nobility to become conspicuous in order for the nobility of others, that the nobility of others may come to your encounter. So with that, we can all start today in every little moment to start refining ourselves, to start allowing our light to shine more and more, and allowing the light and education to come in from others. Thank you so much for being here with me. Thank you.
Good.
Okay.
Bia, thank you so much for this beautiful reminder and a lot of information that perhaps I have to reconsider. Thank you. And I'm pretty sure everyone feels the same way, connected with this message. And what a delight. What is an experience, again, as I was saying at the beginning, to have a young spiritist here giving this boost, right, Paula, and this energy to all of us to understand education a little closer in a more energetic way. So thank you for that. Thank you for your study and your hard work and coming to us as well, right? Because at first the idea was to have her online, and she's no, I'm coming down. So to get to know everyone, to get to know the SSB. So thank you for that. We would like to open up for some questions, some comments that you may have. I know we have one comment back there, but I would like to open here first for whoever would like to comment and perhaps ask a question. Paula, please.
I can always make up one. Thank you. That was refreshing and deepening. I'm interested in our thought projections, and now I know how quickly they move. So once you're aware that you just fired off a negative thought, does counterbalancing it with a more positive one help? I mean, I'm sure it helps.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, right? Like ultimately the goal is that we don't have negative thoughts, but who doesn't have negative thoughts, right? So if you think about it in the steps of improving ourselves, is some people are just firing these negative thoughts and you can't stop yourself, right? Sometimes you get on that kick that you can't stop. But you catching yourself and saying, "Oh, I'm having that negative thought, let me like regroup and not do that anymore." That's already a step in the right direction, definitely. And like redirecting that to more positive thoughts definitely helps.
Thank you. And the question was actually also mine. I had the same question because we keep going back in this loop, right? Of negative, negative, negative. Since we asked the question, what if we get in that loop and we don't know what to do? And do you think with the study, and obviously I am certain because we also have presented many of these chapters of this book with Emmanuel, does the environment also count? And I'm leaning towards more obviously the education piece, where we're so negative about ourselves that we forget that we are this light. So does the environment that we're in counts?
Yeah, the environment definitely counts. Because if we're in an environment and we don't even realize it, but if people are having that negative energy and they're having negative thoughts, imagine that coming to us, right? Whether it's directed at us or not. If we're there with them, right, those are all around. And I think in terms of against like stopping those or how do we stop that spiral that we sometimes get in, a lot of people find that being in nature, being in a place where that kind of clears that air of that negativity that you could be in really helps. You know, in spiritism and religions, we talk about praying, but people meditate, all of these connections that we can reground ourselves and take a step back from this, these thoughts that are around us that we might not even realize.
Thank you, Bia. Another follow-up. Okay, Paula, go ahead.
I feel like we're in a little brainstorming here
Yeah,
because
I
when
love
you
it.
speak, then it makes me think of something else. I really like that image of the human being with all the dots and the spaces because it is helpful to understand we're not just this solid thing, but we're moving energy. What it made me think about was people in general. People make comments about other people, like that's a low energy person or that's a high energy person. I'm a senior, obviously, and I enjoy playing pickleball. And I'm really impressed with how fit some of these 80-year-olds are. So I realize some of it can be a genetic blessing, but does the energy level not only come from, let's say, the foods you eat, but the thoughts you keep?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Having a positive mindset, more, that more positive mentality makes a huge impact. There's so many, type of placebo effects with that, where someone, if they think that they can, oh, I can do this, I got this, they do it so much better than if someone's thinking negatively and not allowing themselves. Maybe they will not become unable to do something because they're just thinking that so heavily. So, absolutely, our thoughts definitely play into that.
Thank you for the question and thank you for the answer. Alba has a comment. She says, "What a fantastic presentation. Thank you for bringing science and spirituality together. In the world of regeneration that we are building, how do you envision schools? What will be the main components of their curriculum?"
That's a great question. That's a big question. Schools are so important, right? That's when we know that from Spiritism tells us that when we're young is that time that we're most malleable, we're most receptive to this information. So I think what's really important in schools is to also having those good morals, right? It's important to teach the science, teach the facts, the history, all of that, but also teaching the morals, teaching being a good person, helping one another. And I think we do that, right, in all religions and all cultures. That's not something that we have to define specifically, but we can teach goodness and kindness. And I think that'll be a big difference.
Thank you. Daniel?
Hey, Bia, thank you so much. I agree with Alba, nice presentation. So my question is regards to the tools that we have, especially the not only the hardware, but the softwares, right? Since you brought a lot of about the technology over there. So I wanted to bring the subject of AI. How can we use this tool, AI, nowadays? That's going to be the future. Is already, we already the future, live in the future. It's already the present is the future, right? And do not forget about the potential that we have, because we resource ourselves so much in the external, in the tools, that we forgot that we have this potential inside of us. How can we balance this in a way that we don't lose ourselves and just let, machine do the work for us?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because that is, right, the future, the present, that is what's already happening. And I think, one, it's important to remember that it's not just the AI doing everything for us. Even just using the AI we have today, we need to put in the correct questions, the correct prompts, right, to get what we're expecting. So don't discredit that we are putting in, right? It's what we put in is what we're getting out. So that still applies when we're talking about technology, when we're talking about AI. It's what we're putting in is what we're getting out. But also, while AI might help with some components that we're doing, there's other ways that we can be helpful, that we can be useful, that might not be what we were initially thinking, right? Sure, AI might help us with our finances, but it's still not going to be able to give us a hug, right? Like, there are other things, there's other valuable uses that we can still help, we can still be useful. Whereas we can let technology help us with whatever it can help us with.
So more education that AI cannot provide, right?
Yeah.
And the feelings that AI cannot provide.
And to that point, right? It's great, like we said, education, it's there, it's coming into us, but what are we allowing to affect us, right? So the AI can be doing whatever it's doing, but if we're not learning from that or taking insights and changing it and whatever we need to be to adjust to that AI, then it's just the AI, right? We're not doing anything. So our openness to it, to that education that might be coming, to seeing what is true right there on all of the AI applications that you use nowadays, it always asks, like, was this correct? Was this a good answer? Was it a bad answer? Because it's also learning. It's also good. So there is the part that we need to put in the work as well.
Thank you. I have another question. Can I? Everybody okay? No, I'm just kidding. One of the things that we don't ask anything of the public. We don't ask, except for donations as far as, helping maintain the house, right? But we don't ask it. We don't go on a tangent saying, oh, you're a spiritist now, you have to act this or that way. We do ask that we put into practice, right? We invite one another to put into practice. And we have been studying, several books. We have our Saturdays here. We have our Mondays that is, geared towards treatment and all. And I am sure that you have done the same and, given many talks and all. What would it be? And you touched a little bit on this, but you brought something that Emmanuel mentions, that we have to internalize this, right? We have to take education to the best way possible, where we're eliminating ourselves, and hopefully that will do to others. In your studies and your, many participations that you have done, and also help to the Spiritist community, what would you say is the best way to do that in terms of internalizing, not just participating in, to a program, a specific event, or even a talk, and just take that as a pill that does nothing? What would you say would be the ultimate way to practice?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think, how many times, right, I feel it in here right now, right? Everyone, I feel the energy, I feel us all inspired, us all ready to do some good, but then we leave out the door and we go do something else. We go do something, we go in traffic and we say, oh, that person, I can't believe they just did that, right? And we immediately drop that energy that we just had so good. So, and that's natural, right? Like we were saying, that's natural that happens. But I think what's really important is to think back, right? After you hear a lecture or a study, the next day, think back to what was that? Oh yeah, what was that yesterday? Oh, next week? Oh yeah, what was that from a week ago? And keep reminding ourselves of that, because it's normal. Our thoughts go a million places. Mine do. They go a million places all the time. But, right, how do we redirect ourselves to these messages so that they don't just get lost, and that we continue to keep them in mind, continue to practice them.
Thank you. Anyone else? Then we will have to post a.
Okay.
All right. Abby, she says, hi, great presentation. My husband, Nano, is asking, do you believe in Philadelphia experiment? Thank you. In the Philadelphia experiment.
Interesting. Yeah, I'll have to get back to you. I don't know what that is. No, sorry, but thank you.
No, I don't want to extend. I mean, we can. Yeah, Paul is asking if we can ask him what it is. But I don't. We don't
can
know.
follow up. Yeah.
Yeah, we can certainly follow up. We'll put that on the hanger there.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't know. That.
And one special comment. Loving how history, science, and spiritism are coming together in this discussion. This is mommy.
Yeah,
Say
this is my mom.
hi.
Thanks.
Video says,
Oh yeah.
vovô e vovó amam você. Oh, that is so cute.
That's my grandparents.
That grandparents say, grandfather and grandmother say hi and God bless
That's
you.
cute.
Yes, thank you.
Well, thanks.
Right. So we thank you again, Bia, and it's hopefully the first time that you're coming of many times, and in joint forces in this idea of educate ourselves first so we can educate others and become a better being, right? I heard something this week that was really interesting in terms of if we cannot, in terms of education, if we cannot allow ourselves to live our lives in a free way, meaning that I can choose to think this or that way, right? When we allow ourselves to be guided by a model or the several other models or what society is dictating us, we're no longer living, right? It's not living. We cannot call that living. So I think that as the Spirit actually, it tells us to educate ourselves, right, and love ourselves. And I think this is a great reminder. This is put a lot in perspective of who we are, who we want to become. So we thank you for that. And what we would like to do is to say our prayer, do a short visualization so we can, in lieu of the passes tonight, and receive the water and be able to be here a little bit longer so we can talk and chat and get to know her a little bit more. Thank you. Thank you, Bia.